Sadaf.
हाँ जी, अरे एक मिनट. यूजुअली मैं बोलता हूँ अर्चित तुम कॉपी कर दो मेरे को. कॉपी कर. खैर कोई बात नहीं. चलो. You do it. You enjoy the fun. Yes sir. Tell me.
आज हमारे पास शेफ चेतन शर्मा है शो पे एंड you know this,
I,
but our listeners will through the episode that Chetan Sharma is a lot of things. But right now he's primarily a chef patron at Bibi restaurant in London. And you'll discover as the show goes what those lot of things are. So Chetan, welcome to the show. And also Chetan is a listener of the show, by the way.
yes.
So we're so happy to hear that.
Yes, huge fan of everything you're doing. I think the job you're doing for Indian food, I think, is so important, just to keep all of those stories alive for as long as possible. And yeah, a real pleasure to be on the show with you.
Thank you, Chetan. Thank you. The last bit, I remember meeting Ranveer Brother a little while back. Actually, once was my first or second time when I met him. He mentioned this, and I shamelessly copied this everywhere, giving him the credit. He said that the food romance should be kept alive. It is what keeps us alive. These small little stories, basically. And I think it's very important. And what you said, right? Keeping like exploring or as people say, excavating those stories. Now it will be more of excavating the stories. So it's super important. Yeah. So welcome, Chetan, and I'm super excited to learn what all is happening with Bibi and what Archit mentioned already. So Archit, over to you, Captain.
So Chetan, first of all, and you obviously get this a lot, but how does somebody who has a degree in material physics and condensed matter from Oxford, as well as somebody who's been a resident in clinical and experimental medicine, become a chef? And a lot of people become engineers in India and then shift, but then they don't go till the PhD route, get a doctorate, and then shift. So why did you shift to becoming a chef? And tell us about your journey.
So, I mean, I think, obviously I speak with a very English accent. We grew up in a Punjabi household here in the UK.
Yeah.
And my family, their background is in farming in India. So both in Hoshiarpur in Punjab and, well, it sounds crazy now, but also in Gurgaon in Haryana, we had farms as well a long time ago. Now you go to Gurgaon, it's slightly different. Not much farming going on anymore. But with that background, and obviously being from a large-ish family, it was completely normal for us to have 30, 40 people in our house on a weekend. And I think a lot of the listeners will be from India and maybe haven't experienced what British Indian life is like. But it's very similar to what we have back home, So it was the same whether I was at my daddy's house here in London or in my nanny's house. They ended up retiring in Mumbai. The feel, the hospitality, everything was the same. We take a lot of pride as a culture of looking after people in our houses. And I think the older I got, while I went down maybe a more sort of traditional, classic, become a doctor, study, go to university route, as time went on, I realized the thing that I wanted to do was also showcase our culture and our history, but also do it through food. Also, I think if you're gonna do anything and be good at anything, and hopefully I'm good at this, you need to spend the time doing it. And I remember even when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor would be in the lab late at night writing grant applications and things like that. And that definitely wasn't the life I wanted. If I'm going to spend time doing something, I wanted to be cooking, presenting food, spending time with guests in the restaurant.
So should we call you Chef Chetan Sharma? Or should we call you Dr. Chef Chetan Sharma?
I mean, most people call me Chip, so whatever. As long as it's nothing rude, I'm happy.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, we try not to be rude usually. No, I'm just kidding. No, so it's interesting, but I still want to know that where then. I mean, a lot of people have this, right? And again, going back, and I remember one of the conversations. Why am I giving third-party reference? But still, one of the greatest Punjabi chef, Manjeet Gill. Okay, Chef Manjeet Gill. And we were having the conversation. We were having a ball about it. And we were talking about it. Why almost all the Indian chefs, right, are Punjabis. If you think about it, from Manjeet Gill, now there's Vikas Khanna, there's Andeep Rar, there is Vineet Bhatia. Many of the Michelin star chefs are also same line who are like, Punjabis. So does the Punjabiyat helps bring or become a better chef, or is it just coincidence?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is we are sometimes comically displayed in Bollywood films
Yeah.
at our generosity. We like to look after people a lot. So I think
Yeah.
that's one part. The second part is, Punjab it's agricultural hub of India. So we grow up with ingredients, learning how to respect them, learning how to treat them. So food becomes a huge part of how we express emotions, I think. And we're very emotional people. So maybe that's why Punjabi people become chefs.
Yeah, could be. And oh boy, they become awesome chefs. But so all this education background that you mentioned, right? Does that help in any way your cooking style as well?
So I think I always try and make the distinction very early, is that learning how to work like a scientist or think like a scientist definitely helps form the way that you work and think across your life. So we do things very systematically, the way that processes are set up in the restaurant. Everything that we do here is very regimented, very orderly, I'd say. And that I think comes from a scientific background. On the other hand, this isn't a molecular sort of restaurant. We do have foams, but we never use that word. We use hydrocolloids, but we never use that word. It's more about learning how to cook properly. A lot of our dishes are grilled over proper charcoal. There's no curries on the menu. It's a very different style of Indian restaurant. That said, it's I think we're cooks first and scientists second in the restaurant for sure.
Great. Yeah, I like that part. Cooks first.
What's interesting? You said that we're as Punjabis. I'm also Punjabi, depicted comically in movies. I can recall very caricaturist presentation of Punjabis. There's always this harippa sound whenever a Punjabi cracks a joke in a Bollywood movie. So I get what you're saying. Also, I want to go back a bit to your educational background. When did the pivot exactly happen?
So I always wanted to know more about working in with food, actually, not necessarily in restaurants. So when I was an undergraduate, so I was 18 at the time, I started to work in restaurants at that stage. It was more sort of evenings, weekends, that kind of thing. It wasn't a full-time pursuit. And then slowly it became, I'd work in restaurants over the summer and then over Christmas. And then every time I had a day off, I'd be in a restaurant. And the nice thing about doing that was I was doing it for free. So I said to the great chefs, the first chef I worked for in London was patron, who had at the time Benares Michelin-starred restaurant. I knocked on the door and honestly, as a naive 18-year-old, didn't know what I was even asking for. I just said, I want to learn more about Indian food. Can you help teach me? Can I just watch what you guys do on a Saturday afternoon? And he said, no, you can't watch, but you can come and peel onions, peel green beans, do all that kind of, they're very entry-level jobs. So I said, okay, let's try that out. And then slowly the bug started to grow. And then by the time I got to the end of my undergraduate degree, I was very fortunate and I was offered a scholarship to do my master's. So I thought, okay, Joe, the option's there. Someone's going to pay you to go to university, and it was a good university. So I'll do that. And then 1 year later, I'll go. And then I got the opportunity to go to Oxford. And again, you don't really turn that down. So it's more a case of I had these things kind of fall in my lap very fortunately, almost by accident sometimes. And then as soon as the day came where I knew I was done with academia, didn't want to go down the sort of postdoctoral researcher route. And at that point I said, okay, I'm going to move to Spain. I went and worked in a restaurant called Margaret's out in Spain, which at the time was really cutting edge on the scientific front. It was ranked number 3 in the world's 50 best, two Michelin stars, like the whole works. And then I haven't looked back since, really.
Wow. Just so the two actually, I want to follow up on that basically. First, when you mentioned about Chef Atul Kuch, and he's one of the, I think, awesome chef. I had the pleasure to, remotely work with him. I was working with him on the background of this researching basically for the new restaurant he has opened up in London itself called Rivage or Rivaz. So that's what I was working. So I'm just curious, like, how's the feeling of working with somebody of that stature? Because also you at the background you have like, oh my God, Michelin star chef. So what does it feel like working with a Michelin star chef in person? So that's my first question, and then I'll come to the second part.
I think it's a very fair question. When I was young, there's definitely a bit of being starstruck. Working with Atul culture, a lot of European. I mean, I actually left Atul's restaurant back then, and then went and worked in sort of modern European 2-3 Michelin starred restaurants because I maybe naively at that point I thought there's more richness to the cuisine at that stage, and wanted to learn sort of what I described as sort of proper cooking technique first, and then maybe revisit Indian at some point. It's daunting working with when you're 17, 18 years old, working with a Michelin starred chef like that. You're in awe of what they can do. I mean, they make everything look so effortless. But slowly, as you become more senior, you start, becoming a head chef, earning your own Michelin stars, all the rest of it. At that stage, you start to say, okay, I get why they were able to make things look so effortless. It's the task of repetition. I was speaking to one of my young chefs the other day, and it's interesting now that I've come to that stage where I have to sort of breed the next generation of chefs already, starting thinking about that. And it's a case of I've probably worked 1,000 Saturday night dinner services in my time. You do 1,000 services, you've kind of seen everything. So I don't even want to think for a minute. I mean, in a restaurant like Bibi, we butcher 200 chickens, 240 chickens a week, 240, 250 chickens a week. So I can probably do it blindfolded by this stage. But what was interesting when I was young was that I looked at people like Chef Atul doing that kind of activity. I remember him showing me how to break down a duck. He used to have these beautiful ducks in from France that we'd butcher in house. And I used to think, God, how did he do it so quickly? How did he do it so well? And then now it's kind of like, oh, okay, he just did it a lot. And that's how he got to that stage.
Yeah.
That
I mean, I could totally imagine like blindfolding and just chopping a duck or a chicken. And the other thing is like about the school, right? So you went to Mark Burchell, is that how it's pronounced, right? So what is that Mark Burchell School of Cooking? That's what I would first understand, and everybody I think would love to understand that.
Oh no, so that's I think that's a very English turn of phrase. So
like School of Cooking, thought process.
Yeah, so it's it's a school of thought. So one of my very close friends, but also somewhat of a mentor, because he was when I was the head of or director of research for Simon Rogan, who is the chef patron of the L'Enclume, which is a 3 Michelin starred restaurant out in Cumbria. He was the executive chef, Mark was. And then when Mark left there to open his own place called Moore Hall, which is, been voted best restaurant in the country. It's won 2 Michelin stars of its own. He's a great chef in his own right. But he's very, and this is a very English phrase, especially to describe a northern person from the north of England. He's very dour. So he's often very, very, he almost seems miserable. And he's from the same place as the Beatles. So if you think of how the Beatles speak, it's kind of the same, like very downbeat, very like, sounds almost laid back, but also a little bit disappointed. So in that, I was saying that the Mark Burchell School of Cooking is you're basically never happy, and that you always want to do better. And I give the example of the night that we won our Michelin star, our first star at Moore Hall. Mark and I, we were at a really nice bar here in London with the investors. His wife was there. It was a really nice evening. But he was miserable. And, I said, what's going on? He goes, how do you think we get from 1 to 2? So on the day that he's won his first Michelin star, he's thinking about the second. And the interesting thing is I was at the National Restaurant Awards with him recently. So this is an event that happens once a year. Moore Hall, his restaurant was #1 for 2 years in a row, which nobody gets #1 2 years in a row.
Wow.
So he got it for 2 years in a row. And then as we're going through the countdown, I mean, I was messing around with him all day saying, we're going to come higher than you this year. Bibi, we're very lucky in our first year, we came number 5. But Mark came number 2. And as soon as they announced that he was number 2, I won't use the word because we're obviously on a podcast, but he's basically like, oh, yeah, crap. Because he was so disappointed at being the second best restaurant in the country.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And then to be honest with you, I was quite disappointed at being number 5. So it's the same it's not an arrogance, it's not an ego, it's just a drive to always want to be the best.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, that's what I wanted to understand as well. And that's why I said, what is that school of thought? So does that anyway complement or help? Because often what happens is that, and this I think comes not just to chefs, but in general to a lot of people, that, oh, you know, pushing one notch up. And because often, of course, you're sort of fighting with yourself to be better or with other establishments as well. So this particular idea that I am, you know, miserable or what's next from day one, like I won an award today, but then like, oh, let's win another award. Does that help, or you just in any way it just like keeps you sort of grumpy?
I actually want to add to that, Sadaf, add to your question and have a second part rather. Is there a tension between getting a Michelin star and actually getting revenue or pleasing audience, your regular eaters? Because, you know, the Michelin star reviewers might have a different palate than your average audience. So, I mean, I'm not aware. It's just a hypothesis, and I want to know more about this.
No, that's both really great questions. I think to Sadaf's question first, I think it can be a good thing, but also if you ask my wife, she'll tell you it's a bad thing. So it's a good thing because I'll give an example to try and make more sense of it. We've had a dish here on the menu pretty much since opening day. So we've been open 9 months, and it's been there. You come into the restaurant and you will see on the menu in our sort of chart section, Orkney scallop nimbu pani. Now Orkney is up in the north of Scotland, and for me the best shellfish in the world comes from Orkney. It's very expensive, but very, very good. It's all hand dived, it's sustainable, it fits in with everything we do here at the restaurant. So Orkney scallop nimbu pani, obviously here in the restaurant we have to explain what nimbu pani is, but hopefully on this podcast not so much. But it you know, we have several elements of in season different either citrus, lemon, whatever. So we had Kaji lemon when we opened. Now we've gone to the sort of standard Indian lime at the moment. And we have like different preparations. There's probably 9 or 10 different touch points on the plate. So for me, with that dish, day one, everybody ate it. Not everybody, but pretty much anyone who ate it was like, wow, that's amazing. That's delicious. In my head, I'm thinking, but, you know, instead of using, we used to have a mayonnaise on there that was made with yellow Kashmiri chili powder and egg yolks. And I was like, there's something about it that doesn't really marry well with the scallop. Now, I think it would have been very easy to say, okay, let's stay with that original mayonnaise. But instead, we went back and said, okay, what if we juice green chilies? So we get that fresh, almost like vegetable flavor from green chilies. And we make a mayonnaise using egg whites, which is a very unusual technique. And we also put some Bombay duck in it as well. So a little bit of seafood flavor in the background. And then we make a chaat masala. So that's got 23 ingredients in it. But that's been altered as we've gone through time, you know. And so now when you have the Orkney scallop nimbu pani versus 9 months ago, it's still the same dish on paper, but it's just been improved. You know, right now we've got unripe strawberries in there, so we pickle those in elderflower, which is a very English flavor. But works very well with the scallop, works well with the nimbu pani, and it's almost like an Indian ceviche kind of dish. And you know, soon the green strawberries will be out of season. We won't have any pickled ones left, so we'll have to move on to something else that goes into it. So as time goes by, we make these small iterative changes and improvements as we go on. So yeah, I think for that reason, being, I guess, a little bit negative about your food is a good thing, because it causes you to be hyper analytical. Right. And the question on Michelin, I think, is a really good one, because I don't think anyone ever asks it. Michelin inspectors, you know, I always joke that my dad could be a Michelin inspector. He's never cooked anything in his life. He's got you know, he knows what he likes. He can tell if food's got enough salt in it or not enough, or if the chili's not balanced, or he's not a great chef by any means. I think I've seen him boil eggs once. That's it. But Michelin inspectors are just very experienced diners, so they are people who know if food is good or bad, and that's about it. I think before, especially when I was coming up, working at places like with Chef Atul, there was an idea that you had to make Indian food look French in order to be able to get a Michelin star. Now, honestly, if we win a star or not, I don't. It doesn't bother me. I'm saying that honestly because I know I've worked now in enough restaurants that have been at sort of two-star level that, without again any arrogance, if we wanted to just win a Michelin star, we could do it. I think we could do it. But the restaurant's really busy, which is good. People love it. People often comment, "Oh, I'm surprised you haven't won a star yet." But obviously, we opened late last year, so it was never going to happen this year. Like I say, if it happens, it happens. But it's not. It's more important that the business is a successful restaurant business. We feed 600 people a week from this tiny little restaurant of ours, and we get to tell the story of Indian food like it's not been told before here in London. Yeah, I'll give you a really good example of a dish that I don't think a classical Michelin starred Indian restaurant would put on their menu is the we call it galoti, but the gulawat kebab.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about history and culture, I think it's one of the most important dishes from India. And especially, I know there's passion for Lucknow in this chat. So so the galoti kebab is it's ugly. There's no way you can make it a beautiful dish, know. And to be honest with you, we serve ours with a mint chutney and with Indian Bombay onions that are sliced and dressed in lemon juice. It's not a fancy dish with like 20 components on the plate or anything like that, and it never can be because it'll stop being delicious as soon as you try to overcomplicate it. Yeah. And I know chefs. I mean, Chef Atul's been in to dine here before. We've had some really really big names come through the door, right. And a lot of people early on were very unsure that the Western market would understand the texture of a galoti kebab because it's a paste, right? So you have to. There's a bit more at the table explaining the history, explaining where it's from, and the toothless nawab and all of these stories, but also just describing the best way to eat it. We grow up with flavors like gevra and that sort of richness and that and ether and these kind of flavors and aromas, but they need some explaining for I guess non-Indians to understand. And as long as you're confident in your own food, like I'm confident. Our galoti kebab, okay, it's not a tunde kebab, but it's pretty bloody good. So we're confident we can serve it. We're confident we can make people enjoy it. So that's it. It's on the menu. If that means we don't win a Michelin star, fine.
Taste over everything, it seems.
Got it.
Absolutely.
This actually brings me to my next question.
Wait. Before you ask the question, the other thing you could also try out, Chet, would be if you want to look prettier, it could be something called Majlisi Kebab or the Ghutua Kebab. I will share. Yeah. If you have not had it, you should try it. It's literally a paste.
We did a duck Ghutua Kebab for Diwali actually last year.
Yeah.
But people don't know it. Even to be honest, even a proper Bihari kebab, like people don't know it here.
Yeah.
But it needs to be explored.
Right? I have been reading about it. I talked to almost everyone about that. Bihari kebab for me is the number one. It's here, and everything else is down below.
Sadaf manages the PR for Bihari kebab.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've read Sadaf's book, so I'm very well aware of his passion for it.
And I always tell that, like, how in India you don't have so much of love for Bihari kebab, but if you go to Pakistan, you have like so much of different variations of Bihari kebab. I'm like, look at them. They enjoy Bihari kebab in all shapes and form. But and rightly said about the Ghutua kebab as well. I had most recently, I've read about it explored, but most recently, which was early this year, at one of the oldest Havelis, and she made me try her version. And that was baller. So like when I come back home, I absolutely have to make it, and I did. It's I think you would know, like, I don't have to explain. You'd know the flavor of it. It's just, I think it's another best kebab that we have had.
I think I think it's very common here in London. I mean, I've traveled around India a lot in research and just visiting family and things like that. But here in London, honestly, you see a Sikh kebab, you'll see variations on tikkas and roti kebab and that kind of thing, and you'll see a shami kebab, and that's about it. It's a shame.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a shame. We do because our menu, we print it every day here, so it changes when we buy whole animals or we'll buy whole sides of animals. So one day we'll have butter kebab on, one day we'll have what's on. Well, I'm trying to think what's on the menu tomorrow. But we got a butter kebab on tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
And so it changes. It changes depending on what we have in stock and what the farmers and the suppliers we work with, what they send us. Now, big difference here against India is the meat here has a lot more flavor.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is there's just a lot more grass in the UK. And unless you start going into sort of Kashmiri territory where you get lots of lamb, we don't really use that much goat. So the stuff that is sold as mutton in India. So the flavor here is a lot more intense. I know a lot of people who move here from India and they don't like what we call mutton here because it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, it's sheep.
So
right?
it is sheep. It is sheep.
Yeah.
And actually mutton is an old sheep, so it's even stronger flavor. And the fat, honestly, it smells like it's very, very strong smelling. But the meat here is very well suited to cooking sort of pink, whereas in India, because it's so lean, you need to use the papaya paste and these techniques of slow cooking and everything else because it's just really tough and different. So some kebabs don't make sense here as much as they would in India.
Got it. That's very interesting. I never perceived it that way. So, speaking of the difference between India and the UK, how is Indian food generally perceived in the UK? And I'm asking you to generalize. Is it fine dining, or because you spoke about so many Michelin star restaurants being there, or it's still generally perceived as curry that one has after a night of binge drinking?
I think that it's moving towards the former, but yeah, I mean, when I started in the industry, there were maybe 2 or 3 Indian fine dining places. So one of our sister restaurants, so owned by the same investors, but completely independent, is a restaurant called Khaana here in Mayfair as well. And I think Khaana was really instrumental in changing the way people perceive it because the food's bloody spicy. Like it's really, really hot, and maybe even hotter than some parts of India, honestly. You have their chettinad duck dish that they do, and and I've had lots of chettinad food, and like it's full on. Even their sort of butter chicken and dishes like that, they look at much, much more traditional dishes.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Misconduct, Raghavi and Nisha analyze actress Riya Chakrabarti's case with lawyer Anshul Chaudhary. On The Habit Coach, Ashton sheds light on existential crises and how to deal with them. On Cock and Bull, Puneet Akash and Antariksh discuss India's projections to surpass China as the world's most populous country by 2023. On Don Baika Gappa Aika, Avanti and Aparna talk about how comparisons affect our daily life, our family, and society at large. And on Think Fast, Varun and Suchita discuss Elon Musk abandoning the Twitter deal. Before I leave, I just want to remind you all that we have some amazing merchandise for you guys. Please go to our website, click on the shop tab, and check out the collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any other platforms you're listening to us. And remember, you can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey which helps us understand who you all are, our listeners. And we'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Boat Lifestyle, Small Case, Capgemini, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
And we are back. Archit is in teacher mode today, Raj. So just saying, you just like last time, bunch of you guys did bring back Archit. This time the hashtag would be why are you so teacher, Archit? That's the hashtag.
वो 3-4 एपिसोड पहले हुआ था.
ऐसे तो मतलब करते रहना चाहिए. Okay,
ठीक है.
to come back to as we promised about sort of understand and know more about the restaurant Bibi. Um, so Chetan, it's in. I mean, the name for sure. I love the name Bibi because it means the senior most or the eldest lady of the house. Often, I think we use this word to grandmothers and mothers. Often, I don't know whether it's a. I think it's a very strong Punjabi word as well, if I'm not wrong. But where, so two three things. Where it's sort of the name, the Bibi, which is your restaurant name, and second is as well going ahead with what we just discussed, right? A bunch of restaurant names that you already mentioned. All of them have a very Indian isk or Indianness name to it, right? So does that help in serving Indian cuisine?
ये तो
So
obvious
I
बात है
think
सदफ. Sorry.
Huh?
ये तो obvious बात है जो तुमने second पूछा.
मुझे क्या पता? I am not
अच्छा,
in
ठीक.
London. How would I know?
I will let Chetan answer.
I think I think it's a fair question. So Bibi comes from, yeah, of course, you're right. It's the eldest most, or the sort of lady of the house. Actually comes from Arabic and then into Urdu and then eventually found its way into this little mishmash language that we call Punjabi. So Bibi, I actually didn't call my grandmothers were Dadima and Nanima. They were very formal, proper Brahmin Hindu ladies, didn't want to be called Bibi. You had to try and speak to them in Sanskrit, and that was the way that you communicate with them. But I didn't want to name the restaurant after one of them in particular, because actually Bibi is about all the great history of our food. And for me,
Right.
the window into that was my grandmothers, both of them. My nanny was a great cook, very, very seasonally led. Before that was a cool thing to do. Even little things like, and this sounds so obvious to an Indian audience, but in the UK, it was completely different to anything any of my friends or people I grew up with knew. Little things like making yogurt every day at home, making your own lassi, doing this, making your own ghee, butter. All of that stuff was very unique to our upbringing here. And that was my first sort of steps into cooking, was making lassi at 5 a.m. for my nanny. And so I thought, when I opened my own place, it should be named after my own roots. And so that's why we called it Bibi. But it's not just about them. It's, in my time traveling through India, more and more I found myself drawn to cooking with grandmothers, not my own, but other people's, sort of the lady of the house more and more. And spending less time in restaurants, because I think it's a pretty well-known conversation piece in India. If you want to eat well, you eat in people's homes. And that's the way you explore the cuisine the best way. So even the design of the restaurant, we've taken bits from like my nanny's old farmhouse in Gurgaon. Even with, I can't really show you, but there's like the detailing around the windows. You can see behind me this design comes from one of my daddy's shawls.
Okay.
So we've taken lots of inspiration from my own family background in how we design the space.
Right.
In terms of how the name helps people understand, well, actually, so what we were quite keen on early on is that Bibi is written in English in a couple of places, but you'll always see it written in Gurmukhi. So that identifies us immediately as an Indian restaurant without any doubt. Everything else, like when you walk into the restaurant, we have little touches of India and of my family, and that's great. But we play old school hip hop. We have abstract art on the walls. None of my team are Indian. I'm thinking about this carefully. I've got my head chef, my head of production sitting on a table near me. One's of a Turkish Cypriot background, and the other one is Spanish. So the restaurant, in many, many ways, when you come in, after that initial interaction with Bibi, the name, does not feel Indian.
Right. The reason I asked you the question, and Archit, for you this, is because, in India, you have, and we did discuss the same thing in our last podcast, that there was a time in India where Indian brands were named in a very English way. And we talked about, for example, Peter England, right? Or Louis Philippe, and still exist, of course. But now it is changing. So an example would be Bibi, or the restaurant like Banaras, or the Kinara, and so on and so forth. All of them have now an Indian name to it, Indian ring to it. And I'm sure probably there are many other restaurants serving Indian cuisine, and yet they're not necessarily using an Indian name, which is completely fine. But I think that at least I am seeing that things are changing. I think good or bad, I don't know, but it's changing for sure.
That's interesting. Do you think there are Indian restaurants without an Indian name, especially outside India?
Well, I think it's interesting that you give the example of Benares, because that's not the name of the city, right? If you're Indian, Benares is an English name. And actually, I think it's a really good way to look at the progression of how food has changed in London. Because before we did have to call our restaurants things like Benares. And slowly, it's coming more back to, we've got places called Kutir and Kahani and now Bibi. And like actually you're hearing more traditionally Indian names more and more so these days.
Right. How did you travel in India? Did you have a strategy when you were researching for the restaurant? Like, did you have a plan that I'll go here specifically? And how did you make that plan?
Yeah, I had a very very rough plan. I knew I was flying. I've been to India plenty of times, but in early 2019, and thank God I did it before everything changed. Because we were supposed to open in 2020, and then we ended up opening a year and a half later than initially planned for obvious reasons. So my plan was to fly into Chennai and then kind of loop all the way around. Actually, was it into Chennai? And loop all the way around through the south, and then go back up through Kerala, back up through Goa, Maharashtra, eventually going to. I kind of missed a bit of the central part, but then eventually went back to go to Indore. So I zigzagged all the way around. The only thing I didn't do in 2019 was Assam and Kashmir were the two. Kashmir I wanted to go to, but there were, again, troubles that year. I actually had a flight. I was supposed to go I was in Ahmedabad and was supposed to go up to Jammu, but that was when it's just, the constant thing that's been happening for the past 50 years. So, so that got cancelled. I had been to Jammu once before to go to Vaishno Devi, where I actually think I had the best meal of my life. And then, Assam is the big one next.
So you visited almost all states apart from these two. That's commendable.
It's important.
Sorry, go on.
It's important if we're going to say we represent Indian food or subcontinental food that we travel throughout, right? It can't just be my upbringing is so blinkered Punjabi that you'd only get 4 dishes if we open the restaurant. We do makki di roti and sarson ka saag, like that would be it. So it was good to spend time in other places because also then you can speak with some authority to say I understand the cuisines a little bit better and I get the subtlety. Like, Kerala is a really good example where you've got the Syrian Christians, you've got the Muslim population, and you've got the Kerala Brahmins, and it's all very, 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 very different.
Absolutely.
And you can't get that reading cookbooks. You have to go and travel and eat and taste and cook with these people to understand it better.
I'm flying to Kerala tomorrow, so I'm excited now even more.
Fantastic. Lucky you.
Yeah.
I thought, Archit, when you asked how did you travel, you were like Uber liya ki Ola liya. I thought
we're planning to get sponsorship from Uber, Ola.
Kitta paisa laga from one point to another point. Discount coupon use kiya ki nahi kiya?
I used Ola quite a lot. We don't have that here in London.
Yeah.
Don't have
so I've got lots of Ola credits, and I need to come back to India to use it. You were asking about my meal as well when I went to Vaishno Devi.
And I think that meal.
This is part of the wider thinking of a meal isn't just food on a plate. because of course I've had technically better dishes in sort of 3 Michelin starred temples of gastronomy in Paris than I had that day coming down from Vaishno Devi. But I'm so hungry. I was so hungry after having climbed all the way up. We stayed there overnight, freezing cold shower in the morning, and then you're back on your way down. And they had these bronte there, which were the size of, I mean, I can't, they're like 30 centimeters across, absolutely massive, and so stuffed, you could use them as a pillow. And I have no other way of describing it apart from there's a tikka of butter on top, fist-sized lump of actually not butter, but white mutton.
White butter.
And it was unbelievable. And a bit of a jar, a little bit of fresh curd. Like, what else could you ever want from a meal?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had that huge ass parantha.
Yeah, and the steam's coming off of it. You're freezing cold. Like everything about it was perfect. Everything about it was perfect. But you give me that same meal here in Mayfair in London, and it's going to be different, right? So it's a time and place thing. That meal could not have been as good anywhere else in the world than that very moment. But it is, without a doubt, the best eating experience I've had in my life.
Yeah, I took my mom to a restaurant when we had golgappas or pani puris. It's like, यहाँ पे मजा नहीं आता, वही road पे थोड़ा सा, the smell of the streets and some pollution, and and the golgappa tastes much better.
No, it's true. I try and my wife's she's very germophobic. So when we go to Delhi together, I try to get her to go to like Delhi Sikhs and go to Aslam's and try all of those dishes. Go to Kareem's, all of these iconic places. And she won't do it. She won't do it. But she thinks. But what she doesn't realize is she's missing out on something that is truly unique. Whereas if you do it in a restaurant, it's just not the same. It's not the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You guys at Bibi use the term contemporary Indian cuisine. So I want to understand, what does this mean in terms of innovating? Is it more iterative, meaning that you enhance what is already popular, or are you trying to create a completely new dish with principles of Indian food?
That's a good question. It's probably about 70% innovation, 30% representing Indian food in a different way. We have on the menu tomorrow, we have this very, very, very simple dal. So it's masoor dal. It's got 2 spices, jeera and hing, and that's it. But just really amazing, high quality grass-fed ghee that we make. So that is just Indian food done properly. The galoti kebab that we mentioned earlier, that's just Indian food done properly. And then, of course, you've got things that are more innovative and maybe a little bit harder to pinpoint as necessarily. They hit some nostalgic factor in for Indian people or people who've experienced Indian food, but it doesn't necessarily taste overtly or look overtly Indian. The scallop's a good example of that. We don't eat raw scallops in India. I don't even know. I know in Goa you get some oysters and scallops, but really, it's not really a shellfish that we have in the country, as far as I know. But the flavors are there. You taste that nimbu pani, and all of a sudden you're transported back to street side of Mumbai and tasting fresh cold nimbu pani somewhere on the street while you have some other chaat, and like it hits all of those flavor points. But it isn't something that you'd necessarily have tasted before in terms of like one composed plate. So that's the innovation part. And I think we're very careful with our tasting menu here at the restaurant, is we start off very, very conceptual. It's like, this is kind of Indian food, but it's kind of not. We do like we've got a raw trout dish on at the moment, which has flavors of jalmuri, but it's not a jalmuri, because jalmuri needs puffed rice and peanuts and this and that, and it's a different thing. We should still be able to tick that nostalgia factor off, otherwise we're failing, because one of our reasons for calling the restaurant Bibi was that if an Indian grandmother ate it, would you recognize it as Indian food? If she doesn't, then we can't serve it. So it has to taste overtly Indian first and foremost, but there's room for maneuver. I mean, it's a huge country. There's lots of flavors. There's lots of ingredients we can play with. And then as you get further into the meal, that's where you find things like the galoti kebab, like the bara kebab, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I could be in Lucknow, or I could be in Delhi right now, or I could be in Lahore, because one of our chicken dishes is based on my grandfather's cooking from Lahore.
I'm curious. Often when I mean, this question is coming because of what you just mentioned about what if a baby of a grandmother or a mother, whoever eats at a restaurant, and would that transport follow him to a separate different place. Often when we get rewards, is often great thing, of course. But I think it's a customer when they give you a great feedback. I think it's like job well done, day sorted, right? Have you ever received a very unique kind of sort of compliment for your food?
I actually got one last week. The nicest feedback, forget the awards, forget everything else. The nicest feedback is when somebody says, this reminds me of something. You know, we've had people say about the Galoti Kebab, oh, we studied in Lucknow, we went to university there. This reminds me of Tunde Kebab. Or, you know, I haven't had rice like this. So we had Johar rice on the menu from Assam. I haven't had rice like this since I was a teenager. So those kind of things are really nice to hear, including, I mean, both of my grandmothers aren't around anymore, but my wife's grandmother still lives nearby. So she's come to the restaurant a few times. And when she says something like that, it means a lot. We had this Sardarji, because we have a kitchen counter here. So we're basically serving, the chefs are serving the guests for, you know, 2/3 of the restaurant is on the counter. And there were these two Sardarjis one from New York, one from LA. So we're talking about very, you know, it's people from all over the world come to this restaurant, which is really interesting for us. And one of them, when he was talking to me, started to well up. And his eyes started getting watery. And because he was saying the Rumali roti that we make here, and we're very careful, we source by Gambari, which is a very, very traditional heritage variety. What my family used to grow on the farm in Haryana as well. And he said, I've not had a roti like this in 30 years. And the last time I remember eating this was when my grandmother fed me with her hands, when my Bibi fed me with her hands last time I was in Chandigarh.
Wow.
So that means more than anything else, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I think our ambition is to keep that story going, right? Or to excavate it, as you said.
Yeah. No, I think these are just, as a chef, I think awards, yes, important. But personally, I believe it's more important to get such direct feedback from the customer or from your client saying, "Oh, what a amazing food you served! Great." I could only imagine what you might have thought when you got a compliment from those Sudajis. So I know that chefs are always occupied. They're always. So I'm not going to ask obvious questions, but where do chefs hang out?
Okay. Anywhere that's open late is normally
And with
the answer.
with whom as well?
Oh, only other chefs. This is the problem almost. You imagine here on a Saturday night, we are leaving the restaurant. The team's leaving at 2:00 in the morning. By the time everything's clean, closed down, packed away because we're closed for 2 days. So they're leaving here at 2:00 in the morning. So there's only actually really horrible pubs or dodgy Chinese restaurants are still left open in London. So we all go to the Chinese restaurant together, or the Chinese area, the Chinatown of London, because it's open till like 4 a.m. We go there, and then we go to some horrible bar afterwards, and that's it. And chefs spend time with chefs, and the more time you spend in the industry, the more it becomes a little bit inbred, because you only see the same people over and over and over again. But yeah, that's it. I always say on a Sunday, on my day off, now obviously I'm a little bit older and married and everything else, so I try and spend Sundays with first and foremost with my wife, and secondly with my family. You know, I've got a brother who's got kids and stuff, so I'm maybe less representative of that. I don't go to the dodgy Chinese restaurant as much anymore, but I'm just happy on my day off for someone else to cook. So we'll eat out, whether it's my mother-in-law, my wife sometimes, but even for her, she's like, let's go and eat something nice somewhere. We spend all week looking after other people, so it's nice to be looked after on our days off.
Yeah. But does that get to you? Does that get you as in just hang out with your own circle? Like, don't you like get bored? Like, oh my god, one more chef. Like, can we please hang out with a lawyer as well, who equally doesn't have a life, who also leave late or will work, will be
Well,
working 24/7.
I'm lucky because my wife's a lawyer, so and so is my brother. So we're fine. It's good. It's good. I think it's very healthy. Talking more about sort of bigger picture. In the first 10 years of my career, I only spent time with other chefs, and front of house managers, waiters, whatever. Being married to somebody outside the industry is super important for balance, because it also helps you just see the bigger picture a bit more. What becomes a really big deal in the restaurant on a day-to-day basis. Like, we had some awful melons delivered the other day, and it put me in a bad mood for the whole day. And it's just like, actually, we didn't serve it. It wasn't on the menu. We sent it back to the supplier. It's not a big deal. But in my head, it's a big deal. And for most chefs, good chefs at least, I'd hope it would be a big deal. But for my wife, she's like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just move on from it.
Confession. When I was cooking full-time chefing, I told myself the exact same thing. I said, what? Like, chefs don't necessarily have life because they're cooking all night, all morning. And of course, you can't take a longer leave, right? So whom can you really date? Two professions, lawyer and media. So I started genuinely hunting for lawyers and media people. Hunting is a bad word, but that's
hunting is a bad word.
Sadaf,
I was like scouting. That's a better word.
इसको बीप कर देना, ठीक है? Actually फिर और बुरा लगेगा अगर बीप करते हो.
हाँ, कुछ बीप नहीं होगा, सब जो है ही होगा. Awesome. One last thing was that, like, when you're in the kitchen, you're cooking and all that. It's a funny question. I'm asking in a very serious tone for some odd reason. People as in who are not chefs, of course, somebody outside chef industry, cooking industry, always say it is so great to marry or date a chef, irrespective of the gender. Would you suggest a person to marry a chef?
I think you need to ask my wife that. Honestly, what you see in terms of, okay, now we're starting to build a bit of a profile, so it's quite nice. Yesterday we were hosted at Wimbledon. We get these little bits and pieces, these little treats, because the guy who has a box at Wimbledon came for lunch here, enjoyed it, so he invited us as a thing in return. There are little perks coming in now, but I've been cooking for nearly 18 years, so it's taken a long time for those perks to start. Otherwise, the reality is, my wife's married to a zombie. She is asleep by the time I get home. She's asleep when I leave in the morning. I see her on Sunday for maybe 8 hours when I'm awake. And I have no energy. I can't do anything. I'm useless. I might as well be a 3-month-old baby at that point. So would I suggest marrying a chef? I think the industry is changing. I think it'll get better. I think the days of people working 80 plus hours a week are going to have to change because of the staffing situation across the world. It's not just in London. Friends with restaurants in Spain, in New York, in all over the place. They're all going through the same thing. So we need to find a balance. I joke that one day Bibi might have to become a Monday to Friday restaurant only. Everyone gets the weekend off. But it's a joke at the moment, but who knows? I think we need to look at better life-work balance for everybody. I think COVID, especially for our industry, showed us that there's more to life than just being in a basement kitchen for 18 hours a day.
So now we know.
So it might change. So soon it might be good to marry a chef. Right now, no.
Unless you're a chef as well. So then, of course, go and marry.
And then you've got 2 zombies on the Sunday. So that doesn't make any sense either.
And that's the fun thing, because nobody will complain because both of you are zombies and then you're sleeping all night or morning. Awesome. That's a great insight for everybody who really want to marry a chef. You now know why you should or you should not marry a chef. Awesome. All right. Now we've come to our last segment of our podcast. And because you have been listening to our podcast, you know our last segment is under and over and favorite. So I am interested in asking you one really interesting question again, of course, as usual, which is your favorite. Will under and over is Archit department. He will ask you that, but your favorite food apart from what you cook or your family cook, anybody, so anybody apart from you, basically. And I know that every chef has their own spice blend or a spice which they think is the best one, and they add that, and it's just perfect. And the third thing is a favorite equipment. Without that,
Okay.
you will not be able to survive.
The food, equipment, and spice blend.
Spice or
Food
spice
equipment
blend.
stuff. Okay, so food. My mom's chole, like so good. She's a terrible cook, and she'll listen to this and she'll get annoyed at me for saying that. But her chole are amazing when she can be bothered.
The chitta chola, the white one or the black one?
Yeah, white one.
Oh,
The black
awesome.
ones are okay too, but we only have them very, very rarely. But yeah, like on my birthday when I was a kid, and she'd ask what I wanted, it's please just make chole. That's it. Her chole are the one thing she makes better than anybody in the world. So
Awesome.
I have to give her that. The spice blend, I use black peppercorns a lot. And I think it's something I've talked about actually at length in the media here. You know, at one point it was more valuable than gold.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you know, Vasco da Gama came over and he took all that pepper with him, and then the whole world changed as a result of it.
Yeah.
And it lost a lot of its value because there was so much poor pepper out there. But when you have like a great peppercorn from, well, you're going to Kerala, so you can get some really fresh stuff now.
Yeah.
When you have great pepper, it's completely transformative, you know. And if you think about historical Indian food, that was our heat source for a long time.
Yeah.
And then that got replaced by chilies. So peppercorns are the thing that I think we have 9 varieties here at the restaurant.
Wow.
We use a lot of different peppers. You know, we do fermented peppers, we do green, white, black, different peppercorns from different parts of India. And some from the Maldives as well, actually, which is really interesting. So pepper is my spice. It's the thing. You know, Nusrat has the Salt Bay thing. I can hopefully one day become Pepper Bay.
Then you both will be Salt and Pepper Bay.
Salt and Pepper Bay. I like it. And the third thing was equipment. God, it sounds so cliche, but knives, just good knives. The difference maker.
Yeah.
You can't replace it. You know, okay, we use probably more than anything, we use a high-powered mixie here. So we use our Vitamix for so many different things to make purees, sauces, chutney, whatever. So that's very important. But if that broke, or if I had no knives, I know which one I'd miss more. So knives is the thing. Invest in them, keep them. I've had some knives for 15 years. So they're expensive, but they last if you look after them.
Because you mentioned cliche, do you also have the knife and spoon and fork tattoo as well?
No, just one. I've only got one tattoo. So, but my sous chef has a tattoo of a spoon and a knife. So he ticks that box for the restaurant.
That's another cliche one. What was written on your that's in Gujarati?
So it says Sharma. Just in case I forget one day.
Just in case if I forget, I should have shown it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. And the last one, which is your favorite and under and overrated food. Because you're in London, let's talk about that only. Not the Indian, but the Indian food that is outside India.
Oh, okay. I'd say most Indian food in London is overrated, honestly.
All of them?
No, most
of them.
Okay. I would say by far. Honestly, I've eaten in the last 3 years 2 Indian meals outside of home, or obviously here at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Where I've never eaten a meal at the restaurant. So, Indian food in London still we have some great examples of it, some really, really good examples of it, but it's got a lot of catching up to do. Whereas I can't remember the last time I had a bad meal in India.
Nice.
The standard of food in India generally, obviously you've got to know where to go and things, but generally is I think maybe that's the underrated one. Food in India can be great, whether it's your local, chai wala, whether it's a stall, whether it's a dabba, whatever, a 5-star hotel. You can get great meals all over in different parts of India.
Right. Yeah. And what would be underrated?
What is underrated? Well, I can't say pepper because that's already been done.
Yeah.
I think still, even though it's getting more attention, I think crab. So everybody loves lobster in this country, and actually really all over the world. I mean, it's okay. We serve lobster at the restaurant sometimes. But for me, if I had to pick on my deathbed, crab or lobster, crab every day. It's such a great ingredient, and you can do much more with it than you can do with lobster. And we have a variety called brown crabs here, which is just amazing, really good. I even got the guys in Spain using them because that's how good they are.
Wow. Yeah, that's one thing that I think is too much of effort to sort of eat a crab. It tastes amazing, but I avoid it because too much of effort.
Well, you have to come to a restaurant like this where we put the effort in for you, so you just have to use a spoon or fork. And then
correct. I think that's the main idea. Like two things: one, crab, and second is custard apple. I feel like
it's a lot of work. Sitaful, we don't get good sitaful here ever. I don't think it travels very well. So whenever I'm in India and it's in season, I'll gorge on it. But it's it's a lot of work for what it is. I'll tell you the other one actually that we need. Someone needs to figure out how to grow it here in the UK, or we need to figure out how to bring it. Is chiku. Chiku is my favorite fruit. I mean, obviously like all normal people, I love mangoes, but but chiku is the fruit that I think I haven't been to India for 2 years, since December 29 is the last time I was there. So it's been a long time. And the one thing I'm missing the most in terms of food is chiku.
And you eat regularly, or do you have anything special doing with chiku?
So my nana used to, because we used to have a tree. So she would make a chiku milkshake, which is really good.
Nice.
Yeah. But just eat it straight off the tree while it's still warm from the sun before the crows get to it. That's the way to eat it. Yeah.
I think chiku tastes better when it's warm. Unlike mangoes, which is amazing. I mean, amazing in general, but when you cool it, it's much better. But I think chiku is just warm and awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Archit, do you have anything to add on chiku?
I actually am not a huge chiku person, but obviously mango I love. But it hasn't grown on me, but I see it growing on me. Like I didn't like it at all at one point in time, but now I can eat it without complaining.
I used to get confused, of course, just like every other normal person, between chiku and potato. But now I know the difference. Awesome. On that nice note, I think we should say bye to Chef. उनको भी काम धाम है, हमारे टाइम थोड़ी है, कहीं गप्पे मार रहे. So करते हैं दुकान बंद. Let's put shutter down. And where, Chetan, how will people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. My handle is Chet Sharma Ops, and the restaurant is Bibi London, LDN, Bibi LDN. So you can find me there. Or if you actually want to find me physically, I'm in the restaurant every day, Tuesday to Saturday. 6 days a week I'm here, 51 weeks of the year. So if you need to know where I am, it's probably going to be here.
Perfect. So people who are in London, go meet him physically. Otherwise, all the show note will have the link and everything to know more about Chetan. On that, ciao, bye-bye.